My girlfriend lied about college while I paid everything. She cheated with Coworker, so I ghosted her, cut support, and let reality hit finally hard. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and for almost 3 years, my entire identity revolved around being dependable. Not flashy. Not exciting. Just solid. The kind of man who shows up, pays the bills, and keeps promises even when it hurts. I took pride in that. I wanted to be that guy. I met my girlfriend when she told me she was struggling through college. She talked about deadlines piling up, professors who didn't care, classes that felt designed to break people. I remember her sitting across from me at a dim little cafe, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug, saying, "I just need to get through this. Once I graduate, everything changes." Her voice cracked when she said it, and something in me locked in. Stepping into the provider role didn't feel like a sacrifice at first. It felt natural. I covered the rent when her hours got cut. Then groceries. Then utilities. Her phone bill. Gas money. Sometimes Uber rides when she was too exhausted to drive. I told myself it was temporary. Education was an investment. Our future depended on it. She talked constantly about exams and group projects, about classmates who didn't pull their weight and professors who were out to get her. I'd listen while reheating leftovers at midnight, nodding, telling her she was smart, that she'd prove them all wrong. When she thanked me, eyes glossy, calling me her rock, I felt proud. Needed. Quiet sacrifices stacked up without me noticing. I skipped vacations. Picked up extra shifts. Put my own goals on hold. When friends asked why I never had money or time anymore, I'd shrug and say, "It's just for now." What I didn't realize, what scares me to admit now, was that I never questioned the story. I never asked to see schedules or grades. I trusted the version of her life she described because believing in it gave my suffering meaning. And if I'm being honest, I needed that meaning, because without it, everything I was giving would have felt terrifyingly empty. The thing is, her college story was airtight, at least on the surface. She always seemed exhausted in a way that felt believable. Late nights, early mornings, coffee cups everywhere. She'd sigh dramatically and say things like, "I have a paper due at midnight," or "My group is useless, I'm doing all the work again." I never doubted it, because it all sounded exactly like what college was supposed to sound like. But looking back, there were gaps. Little ones at first. She never talked about specific classes for long. No course numbers. No syllabi pinned to the fridge. When I asked casual questions like, "How'd that exam go?" she'd answer vaguely, "Fine, I guess," and quickly change the subject. If I pushed even a little, she'd tense up and say, "Can we not do this right now? I'm already stressed." I learned quickly that asking questions made me the bad guy. Anytime I hinted at confusion, she'd flip it on me. "Why are you interrogating me?" she'd snap. Or worse, she'd go quiet, eyes filling with tears. "I thought you trusted me." That line hit every time. I'd immediately backpedal, apologizing, reassuring her. I told myself real partners don't demand proof. Real love means faith. She thanked me constantly, though. That was the hook. She'd hug me tight and whisper, "I don't know what I'd do without you." Sometimes she'd say, "Once I graduate, I'm going to take care of you the way you took care of me." I held on to those words like a promise. Financially, my support became unconditional. There were no limits, no timelines. If she needed something for school, I found a way. Books I never saw. Fees I didn't understand. Emergencies that couldn't wait. I stopped keeping track because tracking it felt unloving. Friends raised eyebrows. My sister straight up asked, "Have you ever actually seen her campus?" I laughed it off, told them they were being cynical. I defended her harder than I defended myself. What I didn't realize then was that trust, when it's never questioned, stops being trust. It becomes permission. And without knowing it, I had already given her all of it. Somewhere along the way, my life stopped feeling like it belonged to me. It shrank down to a routine that revolved around work, bills, and keeping her steady. I'd wake up early, drag myself through long shifts, and come home already tired, knowing the night wasn't really mine either. She'd be on the couch or at the table, laptop open, surrounded by notebooks she rarely used, sighing like the weight of the world was pressing down on her. I told myself this was what commitment looked like. Money became a constant pressure, even though I was the only one bringing it in. Anytime I mentioned doing something for myself, upgrading my old car, taking a short trip, even buying new clothes, she'd frown and say, maybe after the semester. Or worse, I thought we agreed school comes first. The way she said we made it feel selfish to argue. Emotionally, I was carrying more than just finances. She vented constantly, about school, about work, about how unfair life was to her. I listened, nodded, reassured. When I tried to talk about my own stress, she'd say, "Can we not make this about you right now?" So I stopped bringing it up. I learned to swallow everything. My world narrowed. I stopped going out with friends because it cost money or time. Calls went unanswered. Invitations faded. When people asked how I was doing, I gave the same line every time, busy, but good. It was easier than explaining how tired I really was. Friends didn't stop questioning, though. One night, a coworker pulled me aside and said, "Man, you're burning yourself out for someone who isn't even meeting you halfway." I snapped back defensively. "You don't know her. She's trying." I believe that. Or maybe I needed to. At home, she'd curl up next to me and say, "I don't know how I got so lucky." Those moments kept me going. They made the exhaustion feel worth it. But deep down, something ugly was growing. A quiet imbalance I didn't have the words for yet. I was giving everything, money, energy, patience, and telling myself it was love. I just didn't realize how much of myself I was slowly erasing to keep her comfortable. The first cracks didn't come from anything dramatic. There was no explosive argument, no shocking discovery. It was just a slow accumulation of moments that didn't quite line up, like a picture that kept shifting no matter how hard I tried to focus on it. She'd mention being almost done with a semester, then weeks later talk like it had barely started. Graduation dates moved quietly, always explained away by requirements changing or administrative issues. One night, while we were eating takeout at the kitchen counter, I casually asked, "So what's your major again?" I didn't mean it as a test. I just realized I couldn't remember her ever saying it clearly. She froze. Fork midair. Then she laughed a little too hard and said, "Why do you always ask stuff like that?" Her tone sharpened. "You know this already." I apologized immediately, even though I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong. After that, the defensiveness got worse. Any question, even harmless ones, turned into an accusation. "Why are you doubting me? Do you think I'm lying?" Sometimes she'd cry, saying school already made her feel like a failure and I was adding to it. Watching her breakdown twisted my stomach. I hated myself for being the reason she felt that way. So I stopped asking. Instead, I started rationalizing. Maybe college really was chaotic. Maybe I just didn't understand how stressful it was. I reminded myself that not everyone liked sharing details. I told myself that trust meant letting go of the need to know everything. Every excuse felt reasonable in the moment. But my body didn't buy it. I felt tense around her in ways I hadn't before. Conversations felt rehearsed. Stories repeated with small changes. When I noticed, I'd push the thought away and focus on her voice, her expressions, the way she'd squeeze my hand and say, "Please don't give up on me." At night, lying next to her, I'd stare at the ceiling and replay conversations in my head, trying to convince myself I was overthinking. I told myself doubt was the enemy of love. Still, something had shifted. A quiet awareness I couldn't shut off. Like standing on ground that felt solid but had started to creak beneath my feet. And for the first time, I wondered, just briefly, what would happen if I was wrong about everything I believed. Not long after the questions started eating at me, she announced she'd found a job. She framed it like a breakthrough. "Just something part-time," she said, kicking off her shoes and dropping her bag by the door. It'll help with expenses and get me out of my head. I remember feeling relieved, even proud of her, like this was proof she was trying to meet me halfway. But nothing actually changed. I was still paying for everything. Rent, groceries, utilities. Her paycheck, when it came up at all, was always already spoken for: school stuff, catching up, emergencies. I didn't press. I was just glad she wasn't home all day anymore, watching me drag myself back from work while she complained about stress. That's when she started mentioning him. At first, it was casual. A name dropped into stories about work drama. Ugh, Mark is so annoying. Mark messed up the schedule again. She rolled her eyes whenever she talked about him. Don't worry, she laughed once, seeing my expression. He's definitely not my type. I laughed too, feeling stupid for even noticing. Then the late nights started. Shifts ran long. Phones stayed face down. If I asked how work was, she'd say, exhausting, and shut down the conversation. When I suggested picking her up, she snapped, why? I can get home myself. That hurt more than I expected. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't touch it. I just saw the name flash across the screen. Mark. My stomach dropped, even though I told myself it meant nothing. When I finally asked, carefully, if something was going on, she scoffed. Seriously, she said. After everything I'm dealing with, you think I have time to cheat? The word hit me like a slap. I hadn't even said it. She turned it into a fight, accused me of being insecure, of not trusting her. By the end, I was apologizing again. After that, I tried to ignore the feeling in my chest. The way she felt farther away, even when she was sitting right next to me. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. I told myself every relationship has phases. That this was just stress. But deep down, I knew something had entered our lives quietly. And it wasn't leaving. The truth didn't come out because I went digging. That's the part that still messes with me. I wasn't snooping, spying, or trying to catch her in a lie. I was just standing in line at a convenience store near my job when I ran into an old acquaintance from high school, someone who mentioned, casually, that they'd seen my girlfriend working full-time hours for months. I laughed at first. Yeah, she's juggling work and college, I said, like it was common knowledge. They frowned. College? She dropped out like, a long time ago. I thought you knew. That sentence landed wrong. Too flat. Too confident. I brushed it off in the moment, paid for my stuff, walked out to my car, but my hands were shaking. I sat there staring at the steering wheel, replaying it over and over. She dropped out. Not struggling. Not behind. Dropped out. My chest felt tight, like something was pressing inward. That night, I finally asked a question I couldn't take back. When was the last semester you were actually enrolled? I said it calmly. Too calmly. She froze. Completely still. Then came the tears, fast, panicked. She admitted she'd left school early on. I was embarrassed, she sobbed. I didn't want you to think less of me. She swore she planned to go back. She said she just needed time. She kept repeating, I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it already had. Years of rent. Years of bills. Years of sacrifice, all based on a lie that never had an expiration date. I felt dizzy listening to her talk, like I was watching someone else's life collapse in slow motion. Every story she'd told me rewrote itself in my head, suddenly hollow. When I asked why she never told me, she whispered, because you made everything so easy. That sentence hurt more than the lie itself. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I just sat there, numb, realizing the foundation I built my life on wasn't cracked, it was imaginary. And as I sat with that truth sinking in, one terrifying thought started to take shape. If she could lie about this for years, what else had I been paying for without knowing? After the college lie came out, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger yet, it was clarity. A cold, sharp awareness that the rules I'd been living by no longer applied. Once you realize someone can lie to your face for years, every unexplained detail suddenly demands attention. Every nothing, every you're overthinking, every closed door starts to echo. I began noticing things I'd trained myself to ignore. Her phone was never left unattended anymore. If it buzzed, she'd flip its screen down instantly. When I walked into a room, conversations stopped mid-sentence. She started showering the moment she got home, like she needed to wash something off. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the pattern was undeniable. One night, she fell asleep with her phone in her hand. I stared at it for a long time, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't want to be the guy who checked. I didn't want proof. But I needed truth more than I needed dignity. The messages were right there. No effort required. Mark's name filled the screen. Long threads. Inside jokes. Complaints about me, about how controlling I was, how suffocating it felt living with someone who thought he owned her. My hands went numb as I scrolled. Then I saw it. A message from her that read, "Last night was worth it. I wish it was always you." When I confronted her, there was no grand denial. She slumped down onto the edge of the bed and said quietly, "It just happened." She blamed stress. Loneliness. My long hours. She said she felt invisible. She said Mark listened to her. She said it didn't mean anything. I asked her how long. She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Weeks. Maybe months. While I was paying the rent. While I was covering her bills. While I was believing in a future that never included me. I felt something break, not loudly, but completely. No tears. No shouting. Just a hollow, empty silence where love used to live. And as she begged me not to leave, I realized the worst part wasn't that she cheated. It was that she'd already replaced me, while I was still financing her life. That was my rock bottom, even though it didn't look dramatic from the outside. I didn't pack a bag or sleep on a friend's couch. I stayed. Not because I forgave her, but because I didn't know how to leave yet. Everything in our life was tied to me. The lease. The utilities. The routines. Walking away felt like pulling the plug on a machine that would immediately crash, and somehow I still felt responsible for the wreckage. So I kept paying. I went to work like nothing had happened, sitting through meetings while my stomach churned. At night, I came home to the same apartment, the same couch where she now sat quietly, acting fragile. She cried a lot. She said things like, "I hate myself for what I did, and please don't abandon me." Every word was soaked in desperation, and it messed with my head. I wasn't her boyfriend anymore, I was her safety net. What broke me was realizing she expected that to continue. She still asked for money. Still handed me bills without hesitation. One night she said, softly, "I don't know what I'd do if you stopped helping me." There was fear in her eyes, but no shame. Not real shame. Just panic at the thought of consequences. I started sleeping on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall while she slept peacefully beside me. My chest felt heavy all the time, like I was underwater. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus. I felt stupid, weak, replaceable. Every dollar I spent felt like another reminder that I valued her comfort more than my own dignity. The worst part was the silence. No screaming matches. No closure. Just me slowly dissolving while she waited for me to stabilize her again. One night, standing alone in the kitchen, staring at my bank app, I finally saw it clearly. I wasn't staying because I loved her. I was staying because I was afraid of who she'd become without me. And in that moment, something inside me snapped, not into rage, but into resolve. I realized that if I didn't leave soon, there wouldn't be anything left of me to save. I didn't announce anything. There was no big speech, no confrontation, no dramatic last argument. I'd already said everything that mattered, and none of it had changed a thing. Instead, I made a decision in silence, the kind that settles deep in your chest and doesn't shake loose. If I was going to leave, I had to do it cleanly. Completely. Without giving her room to pull me back in. I started planning quietly, almost methodically. During my lunch breaks, I called the bank and separated what accounts I could. I changed passwords late at night while she slept. I canceled subscriptions I'd forgotten were even in my name. Each small action felt strange, like I was moving pieces on a board she didn't know we were playing on. At home, I acted normal. I answered her questions. I nodded when she talked. I let her believe things were stabilizing again. That part hurt more than I expected, but I knew if she sensed what I was doing, she'd panic, and panic always turned into manipulation. Tears. Promises. Fear. I couldn't go through that again. When the lease renewal came up, I didn't say a word. I just let it expire. I arranged to stay with a coworker temporarily. I packed my important things slowly, documents, clothes, things that actually mattered, slipping them into my car over a few days so it wouldn't be obvious. The apartment got emptier, but she didn't notice. She rarely looked up from her phone anymore. The night I left, she was at work. I stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to the hum of the fridge, the distant traffic outside. This place had been my entire world. I locked the door behind me and didn't feel relief, just a heavy, trembling calm. For my car, I blocked her number. Then her social media. Then anyone I knew would pass messages along. No explanation. No goodbye. Just silence. As I drove away, my hands shook so badly I had to pull over. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for keeping her life afloat. And I had no idea what would happen to her next, or how hard reality would hit once I was gone. The first few days after I disappeared were eerily quiet. No buzzing phone. No anxious messages. Just silence. It felt unnatural, like stepping out of a loud room and realizing how much noise you'd been living with. I kept waiting for guilt to swallow me whole, but instead, there was this fragile sense of peace I didn't trust yet. That didn't last. About a week later, a mutual friend called me. I almost didn't answer. When I did, the first thing they said was, "What the hell happened?" Apparently, my girlfriend had shown up at their place in tears, frantic, saying I'd vanished without warning. She told them I'd abandoned her. That word stuck with me. Not lied to. Not cheated on. Abandoned. Through bits and pieces, I learned what happened after I left. The rent bounced. Utilities shut off one by one. Her job hours got cut, and Mark, the coworker she cheated with, made it very clear he wasn't stepping in. "I thought you said your boyfriend handled all that," he'd told her, according to her. The irony almost made me laugh, if it hadn't hurt so much. She scrambled. Asked friends for money. Asked family she'd barely spoken to in years. No one could cover what I had been silently carrying for so long. For the first time, she had to face numbers instead of excuses. Consequences instead of comfort. She tried reaching me through other people. Messages came filtered through friends. "She's really struggling. She just wants to talk. She's scared." Every time I heard that, my chest tightened, but I didn't break. I remember the nights I'd stared at the ceiling, empty, while she slept peacefully. What shocked me most wasn't her desperation. It was how fast her world collapsed without me propping it up. I realized then that love hadn't been what kept us together, it was dependency. And the moment I stepped away, the illusion shattered completely. Still, part of me wondered how far she'd go to pull me back. Because I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't done trying. I thought the messages would stop once it became clear I wasn't coming back. I was wrong. She eventually found a way through someone I hadn't blocked, an old email address I barely used anymore. Seeing her name in my inbox made my stomach drop in a way I hadn't felt since the night I left. The email was long. Too long. It read like a confession mixed with a sales pitch. She wrote about fear. About insecurity. About how dropping out of college made her feel worthless, and how lying felt easier than admitting failure. She said cheating wasn't about love, just validation. She claimed she'd hit rock bottom, that losing me opened her eyes. According to her, she'd re-enrolled in classes. She was going to therapy. She was finally taking responsibility. Then came the line that made my hands shake. I just need one more chance to prove I'm not the person you think I am. I read that sentence over and over. Not who she was. Who I thought she was. Even now, she was trying to edit my reality instead of owning hers. She apologized, technically. But every apology came wrapped in context, explanations, reasons why none of it was really her fault. Stress. Shame. Circumstances. She ended the email by saying she still believed we were meant to grow together, that what we had was too real to throw away. I sat there for a long time, the glow of the screen lighting up a dark room. A few months ago, this email would have shattered me. I would have responded instantly, desperate to fix things, to feel chosen again. But all I felt now was distance. Clarity. I didn't hate her. I didn't want revenge. I just saw the pattern clearly for the first time. The lies. The manipulation. The way accountability always stopped just short of honesty. I closed the email. I didn't reply. And in that silence, I felt something unfamiliar settle in, power. Because for the first time, she didn't get to control the ending. The strangest part of healing was how quiet it was. I kept waiting for some dramatic wave of relief, some big moment where everything suddenly made sense. Instead, what I got was space. Actual, physical space in my head where her voice used to live. The constant second-guessing stopped. The knot in my chest loosened. I could finally hear my own thoughts again. I started rebuilding in small, unglamorous ways. Cooking meals just for myself. Sleeping through the night without waking up anxious. Checking my bank account without dread. Every little thing felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd handed over without realizing it. For the first time in years, my money, my time, my energy belonged to me. Occasionally, I heard updates through the grapevine. She struggled. She moved. She blamed me to some people and apologized to others. Mark disappeared from the picture as soon as real responsibility showed up. None of it brought me satisfaction. What it brought was certainty. I hadn't ruined her life, I'd simply stopped protecting her from it. That realization mattered more than any revenge ever could. I thought about all the versions of myself that stayed silent, that paid the bills, that swallowed doubt because he thought love meant endurance. I felt sad for him. And proud of him. He did the best he could with the truth he had at the time. Walking away without a final confrontation felt wrong at first. Like I'd skipped the ending everyone expects. But I learned something important. Closure doesn't come from being heard by someone who never really listened. It comes from choosing yourself when you finally see the cost of staying. I don't wonder anymore what would have happened if I stayed. I know. I would have disappeared slowly instead of all at once. Leaving didn't make me cruel. Ghosting didn't make me heartless. It saved me. And sometimes, the strongest way to end a story isn't with revenge or forgiveness. It's with silence, distance, and the decision to never go back.